Hello everyone and welcome back. In some previous videos we had the basic of Solidity and some of the things we were already familiar with, right? Like hello world, arrays, functions, some booleans, integers, and maybe some variables here and there, getters, setters, functions, all those things we were quite familiar with. But now we are going to dive much deeper into Solidity and understand some things that are pretty new to us. So today we have a topic called mapping. So what is mapping exactly? Before we dive into the code that is on your screens, I want to just go ahead and use the Solidity example that they themselves show to make us understand what is mapping. So let's head to Solidity by example, and you can see mapping over here. So what is mapping? Maps are created with syntax mapping. Then we have a key type that with a, like, it's called a fat arrow, that is equals and a greater than sign, then a value type, right? So what is the key type? Key type is any built-in value type, byte, string, or any contract, while the value type is any type including another mapping or an array. So mappings are not iterable and they are just created. So what is mapping basically is that um, when you want to link one thing to another, what is a map? Just gets to the basics, right? So what is a map? What in a layman's language do we think of a map? So map is a kind of some drawing, right, which tell us which place connects to which other place, right? So if you have a map of some mountains and river going from between it, it shows the environment, it shows some places which connect to each other, right? It's like a dots, right? So this place connects to this, so it's a kind of a map, right? So mapping in Solidity is also kind of same. It shows that how a key type is linked to a value type, right? How a key type maps or connects or makes us know which of the key type is actually showing towards a value type, right? So if it's quite, I would say, confusing, but not too much. Let's just understand it very simply in a very layman's language, right? So a key type is a built-in value type. It might be bytes, it might be string, or it might be any contract. So maps are much like dictionaries where you have keys and we have variable. So for every key there is a value, right? Key and value. And value type is can be any type including maybe another mapping of an array or maybe another value, any array, something or the other. And they are not iterable, right? So here is a basic, I would say, an example of mapping that, as usual, they're written in Pragma, Solidity, and the version. Then we have a contract mapping. And let me tell you one thing, that if your identifier is not working or it's giving you any kind of error, there might be a possibility that you want to change from 0.5.0 to 0.8.10 or 0.8.13. That's the latest version, right? So if you find any problems over there, just go ahead and just write it down. Just change it from 0.50 0.5.0 to 0.8.13. That's the latest version. And also if you are getting any errors or warnings across Pragma, so just make sure that you have this SPDX license identifier colons MIT in the comment section. It will remove the warning as well, right? So let's get ahead with mapping. Mapping from address to uint. So for that, we just want to write mapping, then the key value, the key type, and the value type. So key type is the address, key is the address, and uint is the value type. Then public my map, right? So let's get function. It's a function get address underscore address. Public view returns uint. So it gets a address and it returns a uint, right? Mapping always returns a value. So it says that mapping always returns a value, and if the value was never set, it will return a default value. So what's the function telling over here is that you give it the address and it will return you a value. So return my map of underscore address, right? So value at underscore address, you just return it to that. Cool. Then is a set function. So if you want to set or update the value at that address, right? So if you have an address and you want to update the value over there, so you just need to say my map of square brackets, that address where you want to change the value, and equals to the value that you want to change, right? And then if you want to remove some value, you just want to use the keyword delete, and the location you want to give the address. Cool. Then we have a nested mapping that we'll cover later, because we just wanted right now to have a simple understanding of what is mapping. So we understood from here that mapping is a simple dictionary kind of thing that can link address to a value. Cool. And when we have to set the value, or when we want to get the value, we just need an address, and it always returns a value, and if it does not have a value, it will return a default value, and in Solidity it's usually 0 for default values. Let's just head right to RemixIDE next, where we have a basic code ready for this. So contract mapping struct, then we have mapping, we have address that maps to a boolean, public my address bool mapping. So it's a boolean mapping. What are we going to do is, so we are just, it's a setter function because it's equals boolean, some address equals boolean. So what are we going to do is, we are just setting some kind of address, the address at some address, we are setting it to true or false. So by default we know boolean is false only, we are just setting a boolean value to it. So at such and such address we are setting the value, that's it, right? So my address bool mapping square brackets underscore address equals underscore bool. So at the underscore address, set the value of bool. Next is overriding or overloading in Solidity. How we do that? So function write boolean mapping. This is the function. So it takes in a bool. Cool. Means actually a bool parameter is passed, and then we want to check message.sender is basically any change, if it's happening, if any change is happening over there. So we want to override my address bool mapping at that address of the sender that sender is sending, and change the boolean at that address. Next, we have another mapping, that is my balance for address. So we want the balance at that address next. So if we want to deposit some money or deposit some transaction at such and such address, so we say my balance for address, then we send in message.sender. So if the address is passed, so we add 1 and message.value, we add in the value, right? So when we want to now withdraw the map from the mapping, we say payable to, because in the last video I guess I've already told you that whenever we want to make some transactions, we make sure that we use payable keyword, that makes it transferable. It makes the transaction possible. So we use payable underscore to and the amount, right? So whenever this is evoked, that if balance address message, if it's evoked and it's the amount is greater than the existing amount, then we decrease that certain amount and we transfer it. If it's not, nothing happens. There may be an error. Now let's just go ahead and compile it. Compilation is done and deployed. So after deploying, we have something like this over here. So let's start from the beginning only. We had my address bool mapping, a mapping. So it's here, my address bool mapping. So let's just get some address from here. I'm getting the first one only. So this one, 99 ethers, it's copied. Just paste it over here, right? So right now, because I have not passed any value, initial value is false. So it's a boolean. At this address, a boolean value is stored that is initially false. So next what I want to do is I want to write something. I want to make sure that this boolean is true next. So I want to use this function write bool mapping. So I think this one, yeah, write this bool mapping. So let me just write true over here and call write bool mapping. It's called, now let me just call this again my address bool mapping, and it's true, right? Next we have a function where we want to use write bool mapping function over here. So what was this is that earlier we were using write bool mapping over here as well as over here. That is overwriting, right? Because we want to use it and we want to use the same function with the same name again, but different values and parameters. You can see in this function we are passing in an address and a boolean, while in this function we are just passing it a boolean, right? So let's just go ahead and check for my balance for address. So now let's just go over there and write bool mapping. So we already have the address copied and it takes a boolean as well. So let me just write in true, which is already true. So nothing should happen over here. So write bool mapping already has this address and it should be true only, right? So nothing happens. Now we have a withdraw function. So for that we already have a mapping that is called my balance for address. So what is over here is we want to deposit some transaction over here. So first we want to deposit something using deposit mapping, right? So for that we want my balance already because it's an address, my balance for address. So we already want some address over here. That's why we want to make some transaction. Without address we won't be able to make some changes or some transactions. So let me take the second one. I've taken the second address and paste it over here. So my address initial value is 0, right? So now we want to make some transaction, say ether. I want to say like 5 ether maybe, and deposit mapping, right? So you can see over here, value 5 ether is here. So it's 5 to 10 to the power 18, I guess. That's 5 ethers. This is done. And now let's just see withdraw mapping. So how much amount do we want to withdraw and from which address we want to so which address we want to pay to. So we took it from this and maybe want to give it to this one, right? Let me just go ahead and this address, oh, I see, and we are also giving some amount, right? So amount maybe I want to just give in 1 ether. So withdraw mapping over here. Transaction is done, right? So you can see that over here we have 5 ethers. When we click over here we have 5 ethers for call, and it's already true, nothing to happen with this one, and we have already withdrawn from here. And just let's go here and check out what's happening. So now let's go ahead and we have more money over here, right? So we want to just copy this address and let me just remove this first, paste it here. The amount, what's the amount? So let's just take like 1 ether. It's 18, right? So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, right? Call this function. So I hope nothing has happened over here. Yeah, nothing's happened here. So that's it for this session. I hope you have understood this well. Because mapping, we're going to use it next again, and do give it a try and go ahead and try out different addresses, different values, and make sure do not overuse the etherware, because there will be some problems in gas as well. So there is sometimes problem when we say that when the usage of gas reaches infinity, there might be some warnings and problems. So do take care of that, don't overuse it, and rest assured that you will love to experiment it with this, and it's a very interesting topic to explore more. I'll drop in the link for the Solidity by example for mapping, where you can go ahead and explore more examples as well and try on the RemixIDE. Till then, I hope you enjoyed this lecture as me, and see you next time. Till then, keep learning.